What's going on? I want to welcome you from half court for today. I am Sean Murphy, joined by Marquette's movement shooter, but more importantly, my friend Troy Sergey. Troy, how you doing today, my guy? It's good to see you.
It's good to see you. Doing well, Sean. Great win for the Pistons last night. Looking forward to this evening going to see the number one team in the East, the Cleveland Cavaliers, take on the Indiana Pacers. So I know we'll have a lot to talk about that team too, of the Cavaliers and just their performance. A 12-game winning streak that just ended against the Pacers actually on Sunday to Cleveland. So there's a lot to be
Only,
excited about in the NBA,
yeah, only their fifth loss of the season, if I
which
have
is
that right,
insane.
which is,
Insane.
but yeah, absolutely nuts stuff. But definitely want to talk about the Cavs a little bit. But first, Troy, we do. Oh my goodness. But first, Troy, we do talk primarily Detroit Pistons here, and that is what we got to dive into, that Knicks game last night. This is From Half Court, where we talk all things Pistons basketball, as well as some NBA hoops too. If you like that, be sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell down below so you're not missing when our content comes out. But also, be sure you follow us on social media to not miss any coverage. Myself at Sean Half Court. Want to see Troy tweet some of his tirades and random thoughts at Troy Sergey 44. But Troy, the Detroit Pistons are currently 12-4 in their last 16. They are now 2 games over 500. We are at the 40 game point of the NBA season, and the Pistons are 21-19. They are already past last season's win total. They are already past the season before's win total. If they win 3 more games, they already will have won 10 more games than last season, and it is not even February. And a lot of this, Troy, is because a certain guy that we've talked about on this show a couple times and are seeming to have to come in every week and just continue to say, that Cade Cunningham guy's special. And, before the conversation's been, oh, Cade Cunningham, he's making a real case to be an all-star. Like last time that we talked, it was like Cade Cunningham has to be an all-star. Troy, I think we're already past the point of saying Cade's an all-star. Like you can't debate that anymore. Like that's just fact, right? The conversation to me is Cade Cunningham is making a case to be all NBA. And if he keeps on this pace, I think there's a case to be made that he's first team all NBA with what he's done this season and the level that, the Pistons have ascended, especially over this last month. In the 16 game stretch, Cade's averaging 26 points, shooting 47% from the field and 39% from three, 9.7 assists, uh, 5.8 rebounds, 3.8 turnovers. That number's continuing to go down. And in the Garden in particular, Cade Cunningham, that's pretty much where he plays his best hoops as of late. And they now won not one, but 2 games at Madison Square Garden this season. So, with that, Troy, I pose this question to you, and this is a serious one. Is this the best time to be a Detroit Pistons fan since 2005? Because I can't think of a better time to be a Detroit Pistons fan than then. Because as good as the playoff runs have been before, in the 2015 era or the 2018 era with Blake Griffin, as fun as there's been moments with those teams, the different thing that this team has is it has promised to be more than it even is right now. And
Mhm.
that is something that cannot be said about a Pistons team since 2005.
Yeah, you nailed it, Sean. You absolutely nailed it with that. And yeah, of course, there's arguments for 2006, 2007, and 2008 when you're still producing good teams, and
Well, when
even
you lost Ben Wallace, in my opinion, that argument that
right,
that
but
argument goes out the window.
you still had a pretty competitive series against Miami and Cleveland in those years to comes after Ben lost. But you're right. Your point is there of then because I mean in those eras, your question was, well, we already won a championship. What else more can we do, right? Besides win another one. And with of course we know since then, especially when they traded Chauncey and brought in Allen Iverson, and the whole rebuild around Stuckey was a disaster, and Ben Gordon. There's so many painful memories that we don't want to talk about that we know that this team certainly is already better than. And I think, yeah, what makes this team special is the promising future of knowing, okay, they're only slightly above 500. We've seen teams, that 2016 team was pretty decently above 500. I think they were 45 and 37. But it's not about this team being slightly above 500. It's about the young stars that we have, the good coach that we have, and just the continual strides that we're going to take on this team. But if we're going to take strides and we're already beating the New York Knicks, who are a third seed in the Eastern Conference right now, twice at their building, that's pretty exciting to know that there's only progress from here when we're already making
Mhm.
big progress. And you're right, Cade is the guy doing it. And for me, I've said before, it's the consistency. We know that he's going to get his on the offensive end with points. We know that he's able to dish the ball. I think this is a year where he has a lot of competent shooters on his team. We'll get to Malik Beasley in a moment, and Tim Hardaway Jr. And I think for me, Sean, just seeing it all come together and seeing how this team, with its coaching staff as well, looks very promising.
Yeah, and I think the biggest difference is, like, with Cade, I don't know if his game as a whole has taken this massive leap from before. Like, I think anyone who's watched Cade Cunningham from the beginning of his career could have told you that this is exactly what he was capable of. Especially the people that, that are the believers, and, that just saw that from the beginning, right? And I think what it took to, in order for that to really be noticed, as we talked before about, is it has to translate into wins, and it has to happen on a more consistent basis. And I think that consistency is what's leading to this turnaround that the Pistons are having, because it's not just that, oh, like, there's some nights where Cade's going off. It's like, no, Cade's doing this every night now. It doesn't matter who they're facing. It doesn't matter what they're throwing at him. He is making it happen. And part of that certainly is because they have to respect the shooters like Tim Hardaway Jr., certainly have to respect Malik Beasley. You even have to respect, a guy like Jaylen Durham when he gets close to the rim. So, there's more offensive threats opening up the floor for a Cade. But it also has to do with the fact that the game is slowing down for him on a mental standpoint. It
Yeah.
also has to do with the fact, that his conditioning is in a better place. And so, you can't wear him out or slow him down, or, force him into as many bad decisions. Like, we're just seeing a guy that is putting all the pieces together. And I think what's special about it is, for the first time, truly, since Chauncey Billups or Grant Hill, are watching a star be born in front of their eyes,
Mhm.
right? And I think even, like, even the difference with, like, like you brought up those, 2006, 2007, 2008 teams, I would certainly agree, like they won 60 plus games, they still won high 50s, like that was a great time to be a fan. But there was also the inherent knowledge that there was a inherent cap, that this was only going to stay like this for so long, because there were guys like a LeBron James right down south that were on the ascension. There was Dwayne Wade, who got his first taste at a championship, and you knew he was going to be coming back for more. The thing that's exciting, Troy, is that ascension's happening in house now.
Yeah. Right.
And, when is the last time that we could truly say that someone, deserves to be in the upper echelon of all NBA talks? I mean, Blake Griffin, when he was in Detroit, he had that year where he finished, I believe, third or fourth in MVP voting. He was a third team all NBA guy. Like we've seen that, happen in Detroit, but we knew there was a cap there because of the knee injuries. And sure enough, the cap was right then, right there. With Cade, he's not even under his extension yet. So he has, and he's not even 24 yet. So you just talk about the where this can go even further. Like, the Pistons are in position to be a player in the Eastern Conference for years to come, and a legitimate player. because they have one of those guys. And I don't think it can really be argued like, Omari Sankofa, friend of the show, beat writer for the Pistons for the Detroit Free Press. He asked Tim Hardaway, he's like, Cade's one of the best guards in the East. Tim Hardaway just stopped him right in his tracks to correct him and go, the NBA.
Yeah.
And that's where we're at. It's
Yeah.
no longer Cade's one of the best guards in the East. Cade is one of the best guards in the NBA, period. And
Yeah.
it's taking this Pistons team to the next level.
Yeah, so exciting, Sean. And I'm glad you mentioned earlier of how the game is slowing down for him. And I think that's a really important point to bring up because you just see that it's becoming easy, if you will, out there for him of as far as knowing where to go on the court, knowing spacing, knowing he can get his own on the offensive end of scoring the ball. And I think just seeing how that's become so natural for him has been fun to watch. And if you look at other players like an SGA, you see that same sense of play style from him. You think of Luka, and it's they're very similar where the game slows down and becomes easy, and it really becomes their ball game. No matter
Yep.
what opponent you're playing, it becomes their ball game. And I think that's what's really special about Cade. And that's for me what's been able to help me open my eyes more of really how special of a player is that he plays with the exact same persona as a SGA and a Luka of how the game comes to them and how the game slows down for them.
And this is and for anyone that's rushing to the comments and going, "Oh, this is you guys are just being homers. This is a little extreme." This isn't just something that, that this is coming from me. JB Bickerstaff last night expressed that he believes that Cade Cunningham is ascending into the elite air of this game. And when you have your own coach coming out and saying that, and mind you, you don't necessarily throw that out there if you don't really believe that your player can go and back it up. And again, look at how teams have been guarding Cade from the beginning. They knew that this is something that that was only a matter of time, and it's gotten to a point now, Troy, where people online are having the debate of if you're starting a franchise, would you rather have Anthony Edwards or Cade Cunningham? As much as we loved Cade Cunningham, in the summer, I don't think we even thought that was a conversation just because of, Ant's athleticism, the early success they had already seen in Minnesota. I mean, Troy, with where things are right now, with how Cade has developed and where he is as a leader and his maturity and his game and how that can only go up. And in contrast, where Anthony Edwards is, I think it's much more of a conversation than the general casual NBA fan might realize. And quite frankly, I think a lot of executives would go with Cade.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's a good question. It's a question that when you posed that this morning in our text thread, I of course I went immediately of okay, that might be kind of pushing it. We know Anthony Edwards play. We know even his run in the playoffs last year to get that team to the Eastern Conference Finals again. Sorry, the Western Conference Finals against Dallas. And we even saw him, what was it, last night or the night before? He exploded for 41 against Washington. I mean, I know it was Washington, but uh, he plays with a style and a persona that's very much an assassin, and they're different positions. So as far as who you're not really comparing the two, you're comparing more so of who would you rather build your franchise around. And
Mhm.
I think it's still with this kind of inaugural Cade taking the throne season, it still might be a little bit hard to answer that. I would like to probably answer that next season, especially to see how the Cade takes this team into the play-in tournament and seeing exactly where the Minnesota Timberwolves fare. I'm not quite ready to answer, Sean, but
So
I
so so Troy, you are going on the record and saying, I, Troy Sergey, am copping out of answering this question.
yes, bingo. That's the answer right there. That's the answer right there. Bingo, 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 bingo. I'm not ready to answer that, but give me a year. January 14th, 2026. I will answer this question.
The fact that it's even something that you have to ponder says everything that you need to know. Because again, this wasn't a conversation I think people following the basketball world would have been having a year ago. But I think we're there, and I think, especially if this only continues to, to go on the rise, like, Cade Cunningham is someone who's very much in position to be one of the future faces, not just of, the Pistons, but I mean, of the NBA itself. So, and especially for a league that needs young American stars, Cade's got a personality to him, man. I think
Yeah.
he's someone that very much can garner some national attention. I think he's starting to.
Mhm.
The way you do it, by the way, is you do things like they did in the Garden.
Yeah.
And, I think another guy that's starting to get some national attention, some national buzz, like you brought up, is Malik Beasley, just because of his energy and his personality. But also, it's like, wait a minute, the Pistons got themselves a player here. Like this
Mhm.
is a veteran that is playing some pretty big hoops, and those two big corner threes last night in the Garden against the Knicks, it was just another line of clutch big shots hit by Malik Beasley, and it just seems like whenever this team is in need of a bucket, he's right there to deliver it, even in games when he's not shooting well, by the way.
Right, right. No, he's been a great addition this offseason to have, and it's opened up guys like Cade. And I know Ivy's out, of course, but we know when Ivy was in, it helped him out too, playing a lot. And I think, yeah, he's just been a great guy. And I remember, last year with Milwaukee too. I mean, he had some good stretches, some good games, but nothing like this. And I think his role shifting has a lot to do with that. But it's going to be interesting too. I mean, I don't think we're not going to be anywhere remotely trying to get rid of him at the trade deadline. I think he is going to be
No.
a piece that's going to be carrying it into the play-in tournament and hopefully the playoffs for the Pistons. So I think for the Pistons to continue this stretch, I mean, he is a catalyst to doing that. We
Yep.
need Malik Beasley to be making those shots, and even a game like a couple of days ago, Sean, against the Portland Trailblazers at home. I think that was a week ago now already.
Yep.
He didn't have a great night, but he still impacted the game in other areas, like on the defensive end, and he still hit a shot there at the end to help the Pistons win that game. But so even when the shots aren't falling, he still is effective on the court, and when the shots are falling, we know how effective he can be. But I just love this addition, Sean, and I'm looking. I think I brought this up last podcast. Is we've seen guys like Alec Burks, we've seen guys like Bo Young, we've seen guys even back it up 5 years, like a Wayne Ellington. But something
Yep.
about Malik Beasley is different with his effectiveness, with his range, and his impact on all areas of the court.
I think in part it's his personality and it's his
Mhm.
persona. I think that certainly plays a role. I also just think the fact that a lot of those guys needed creation from others to get them going or to put them in a position to be successful. And while, Malik Beasley certainly in a lot of situations where he's coming off screens or where he's in catch and shoot opportunities, he also has an ability to create his own offense. And so I think part of like what's different as well is there's just more of a dynamic game there. And I think when you throw in the fact that he has the Detroit connection and he has that Michigan, you know, lineage and has that, has that kind of proud homer kind of
Right.
attitude towards him,
Right.
it's something that just it's a perfect fit all ways around.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, by the way, the fact that the Pistons are, doing this well and still like Troy, they're since Jaden Ivey went out, they are 7-1.
Yeah. Right.
Like they're just still rolling on. And like ever since Jaden Ivey has gone out, Cade's averaging 27, uh 8 8 assists, 6 rebounds, almost 2 steals a game, 43% from 3, 50% from the field. So it's like, "Oh, I need to step up? Okay." And other guys are doing so too, and even someone else who probably isn't as appreciated for what he does is, Tim Hardaway Jr. Even when he doesn't have his shot going, I think he's already taken more charges this season than the
Mhm.
entire Pistons roster combined did last season. And he's a guy who, he had that open opportunity, from beyond the arc last night against the Knicks, he could have very easily taken that shot, and I don't know if a whole lot of people would have blamed him if he did. But he saw Malik Beasley was open. He realized he was also, having a hot streak. And when you're that type of shooter, has that type of confidence, but has the wherewithal and the freedom of ego to pass the ball and to make the right play. Troy, that just speaks volumes. Like last year, if that's Bojan up top, he's shooting that damn ball every
Right.
time.
Right, and it was amazing in that specific play, Sean, because Tim Hardaway Jr. was open, and a shooter like him,
Yes,
when you're open, you shoot. But Malik
yes,
Beasley was more open,
yep.
and he made the right pass.
Yep, few things are more cathartic to watch in basketball than the extra pass and the right pass, and that's exactly what that situation was, especially when it leads to a win because it's winning basketball, and I think that's just what's been instilled to this team is the realization of what are those winning plays, and I think that's, when you see the biggest difference of having, we've talked a lot about how, having veterans and adults in the room, how it can lead to, to more success. A lot of the losses the last couple of seasons have come down to the marginal execution, to those final minutia little details that are the difference between winning and losing in this league.
Mhm, mhm,
And that's exactly where the Pistons are excelling, especially over the last month. I mean, Troy, they started the season 9-15, and ever since are 12-4.
mhm, mhm. Yeah,
And I also don't think that's necessarily much of a coincidence, by the way, of you know what that pretty well coincides with?
what's that?
Pretty well coincides with when Asar Thompson came back into the lineup.
Yeah, yeah,
And and he's someone that even though he still isn't, quite fully playing, the level of minutes that, I think that we expect him to, as things go on, he's still kind of, like the restrictions aren't really quite there anymore, but he's still working his way back into the lineup. Especially of late, Asar Thompson has been playing extremely good basketball, and even when the shot is still not looking great, which, this year it's still not looking great, he's still finding a lot of ways to, just play really good winning basketball.
yeah, absolutely. He did hit one nice three-pointer last night against the Knicks,
Yep.
in crunch time, which was good. But you're
And
right.
then there was the other 3 that was in crunch time that very much
Yeah.
missed wide left.
Hey,
Yeah.
hey, I didn't bring that one up. You brought that one up. No, you're right. But yeah, just his defensive presence. And I think that's always something that I've just loved about Asar Thompson, even last year as a rookie. He always wants the other player's best wing, right? And even last night, there was some good matchups against, Mikal Bridges and things like that. So I think with him, Sean, he's learning to play with these guys as well. He's just a second year guy as well. And there's only going to see improvements from him. So, he's a guy that I'm really happy we have in house, and I think it's only going to be developing from here.
Yeah, I agree. And, quite frankly, I think another player that just deserves some attention and in a positive way and deserves some, just some praise, a guy that's, been criticized pretty heavily on this podcast this season. And I feel like we would be, not consistent if we didn't point out when he's playing well, is Jaylen Durant.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think especially, if you look at what are one of the reasons why the Pistons are ascending the way that they are over this last 16 games, it is because they're getting more consistent big play, from Durant. I mean, his averages have gone up over the last, in this last 16 game stretch. He's up to about 11 points a game, about a block a game, 9.7 rebounds, 2.2 assists. The turnovers are down as well, which is a really big thing. He's shooting about 70% from the field, so he's efficient. He's taking better care of the basketball. I think you're seeing better effort on the on the defensive end as well. One thing as well, just as someone that's been around and been able to like hear Duran just talk about his game, like whenever he came out, he said that he came out flat in the Portland game and acknowledged acknowledged that. And in the next game, after they played Portland, they played at Brooklyn. He came out and, at least at the beginning of that game, like came out with some energy. Like that's just, and I think that's just something that you're seeing from, just from him, is just like the realization of what's needed from him. And like as a result, like in the NBA, him and Isaiah Stewart are both in the top 15 in block percentage.
Yeah.
So, you're getting like I still think Isaiah Stewart is this team's best defensive big. And, that's probably unfair to Durant because Isaiah Stewart looks like an all NBA level defender right now. But I think we're starting to see some development of Jaylen Durham under JB Bickerstaff. Have you noticed similar things, Troy? And what do you make of his development as the season's gone on?
Yeah, certainly I have. And two words that you already brought up is efficiency and effort. I think looking at the stat sheet can be a helpful thing. It doesn't always answer all of your questions, but I think just looking at the efficiency with the field goal percentage and just when you watch the games too, I mean, when he's down low on the defensive end too, I mean, he's looking to grab that next rebound. And that's something that I wanted to see out of him this year. And yeah, I think coaching staff is going to play a big part of that. And I think even last night there was a play on the offensive end where getting to the right spots is important too. And as a big, it's a little bit tougher than a wing. A wing, I think, has the freedom to really know the ins and outs of where they need to be on the court. But Marcus Sasser was dribbling out the ball, right? Shot clock was winding down. I think the Knicks had a double team that collapsed on him. Durant wide open for the pass and just slammed it down. And that was a fourth quarter play. And, that really helped the Pistons, make that offensive, play during that fourth quarter. So yeah, no, I'm seeing it, Sean, and I'm seeing it even differently than how I saw it in November, just 2 short months ago with
Yep.
Jaylen Durham's performance. And I think, yeah, efficiency and effort are going to be the words that I've seen play out in Jaylen Durham's month of January so far.
Yeah, most definitely. And with what the Pistons, with this level of play, now that the deadline is starting to approach, and the conversation is, well, are the Pistons sellers?
Mhm.
Are they buyers? What do they do?
Right.
I still struggle with that answer, Troy. I
Mhm.
definitely think that if Trajan Langdon can find a way to improve this roster without giving up significant assets for the future,
Yeah.
I think that is something that would most certainly be, like most certainly be like a benefit. I think making any bigger moves in season might be a mistake because there might be more available to you in the off season. And once you see what this team does as constructed, as the season goes on, like, do they make the playoffs? Do they win playoff games? Do they somehow, as constructed, win a playoff series? Like, not to, get too crazy, but like, what can they do
Mhm.
as constructed? Because
Yeah.
that to me tells you how risky you want to get. I mean, Draymond Green just came out himself and said bad teams mortgage their future out of desperation.
Right.
And
Right.
we're
Right.
not a bad team, right?
Yeah.
And so that's very much something that has bit the Pistons in the ass in the past.
Right.
And
Right. Right.
so, to me, like, I know the Trajan Langdon, there were odds about him being like, the executive of the year. And, I understand why those odds are the way that they are. I think how he handles this, in my opinion, is what would really settle who would be the executive of the year. What are your thoughts on, and what would you want to see the Pistons do at the deadline?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm going to start there because we also hear the phrase "run it back" a lot with good teams, and are they willing to run it back, especially even if it's a loss in the NBA Finals or even the Eastern or Western Conference Finals, whatever. But a phrase that we never say is "run it forward." And I think this is a team where a Pistons team where we want to run it forward. We don't want to necessarily hurt the team's ceiling by moving too soon. And you think of not that, the 2013 or 14 Pistons were going anywhere, but a guy like Chris Middleton dealt way too early. Even a guy like Spencer Dinwiddie, way, way too early getting rid of. You have to watch some of these guys blossom and see how they can impact winning. So, to be honest with you, Sean, I'm not really worried much about the trade deadline as far as there's no one that on this current roster that I'm dying to explore options for. But where that comes into, we're talking about buyers or sellers. There's no one I'm willing to sell really right now. But it would be very interesting to see what other teams are willing to give up, because I think that's the thing too, is when you are a seller, at least from a distance watching, when you're a seller, sellers normally lose the trade in the long run, historically speaking. Not every situation, but historically a lot of times it happens. Sometimes they find a great player, but I want to watch the Pistons to see, okay, what types of players can they potentially bring in that would better help this roster, versus I'm not trying to explore of who has the right value, which in years past we've been always talking about who has the value on the team.
Yeah, I don't I think if you were to talk about in years past, it would be like, "Oh, what could you get for Malik Beasley?" or, "Oh, what could you get
Exactly.
for,"
Exactly.
like Tim Hardaway Jr. I think we're in agreement that that's just not where they are. Like,
Correct.
like they are on the up, they are not on the down, they are not on the, on the middling. So, I definitely don't think that them just selling off to just get as many assets as possible. I just don't think that's what makes sense for this group. I do think that they can still get assets and rent out their cap space to other teams so that they can give themselves more options going forward. I don't know if that's the sexy move, but if you talk about like, okay, well, what could this team do going forward? I think that's where this would, that's something that would at least give them or equip them with more options, more tools at their favor, so to speak. I don't necessarily know what names are going to be available, and I think that's the thing of like, would you really want to give up a first round pick for like a Nikola Vucevic type player that's in their 30s that you don't really know how much longer they're going to give you, and especially now that Jaylen Durant's playing a little bit better, I don't know if especially even a player like that is someone you'd have to explore. But, again, it's just interesting that it's just the fact that there's even the conversations of improving and not selling off just tells you this team's in a lot better of a spot than they were.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think that's a good way of putting it too. And the contract thing, it's going to be interesting too, because yeah, there's no players or teams that's really emerging in my forefront after hearing your take there. So we'll have to see.
Uh-huh. Now, one player that will not be coming to the Detroit Pistons, Troy, is Bradley Beal. In fact,
What?
I don't know if he'll be able to be moved pretty much anywhere because Troy, I submit to you with this mess in Phoenix right now and just how bad things are. I believe they started their season 12-3 and they are now 19-19. Just to give you an idea of how bad this truly is.
Do the math. Yeah.
Apparently, reportedly, a Yusuf Nurkic deal is imminent. He's apparently already unfollowed Kevin Durant and Devin Booker on Instagram. He apparently is falling out of the rotation and has become almost unplayable. So now they're in a position where their starting center is Mason Plumlee. And as we talked before about just where this team was, salary wise or financially, uh, oh, they started the season 7-3. My bad. But nonetheless, where this team was, financially, if this team did not see major success, this could spiral very quickly, and that's where we're at. And the conversations of how to better this roster, we know who they want. They want Jimmy Butler, and we know that's where Jimmy Butler wants to be too. And that is all fine and great, but the only way that's happening is if a Bradley Beal goes to Miami or goes to another team. But when he has a no trade clause and the only person that can waive it is Bradley Beal, he holds every single card in this exchange. And so, Troy, this is where I ask you, is Bradley Beal, and again, not saying he's a bad player, is Bradley Beal, his current contract, the worst in the history of the NBA? Because I think there is an argument to be made.
Yeah, Sean, there's no really names coming to my head that is a close competition for this one. And for me, kind of looking at the more basketball lens, with a roster that's constructed that way, you would hope and you would think that there would be more urgency on the floor. But if you watch some of those Suns games, Sean, there's just not there's not that fire to win. I just don't see that. But historically, some of these players, like a Kevin Durant, like a Devin Booker, the Suns did go on a finals run in 2021. We've certainly seen the final runs that Kevin Durant's had in his career with the Warriors, and even some Western Conference finals runs earlier in his career with the Thunder, and finals run with the Thunder. But that urgency and that fire isn't there. So I worry about that more than anything. If you have on paper an amazing roster filled with all-star level players, but you can't win games at all. So yeah, looking back at the Beal situation now, I mean, I just don't know what you think you could have accomplished with bringing him in on that type of contract, locking this roster up in its current state. Because I
Yeah.
think that's the thing is you look at a lot of teams that have successes, they have freedom. Freedom is good. Freedom helps you be flexible when it comes to the trade deadline, when it comes to the offseason. But they didn't really have any type of offseason this past year because they couldn't. And
Yep.
I think that really shows you a lot of where the Phoenix Suns have been and unfortunately where they're headed. It's not going to
Well,
get better.
well, they cycled out coaches, which, like with all, like, we all knew that Mike Budenholzer was a
Yeah,
good coach, but we knew that this wasn't a Frank Vogel problem, right? Like this wasn't coming down to who was calling the plays, who's setting the lineups and the rotations. What we've said before, when you're rotating feces, it's still feces. And just looking at this whole situation, it's one thing with the Wizards. They're the ones who actually signed the contract, offered it, put the no trade clause in the contract. They're the morons that made that contract exist, right? But
right.
Phoenix were the morons that said, "Well, we can make that work.
We
We
can work
can
around
win
it.
with that." That's fine if your third best player has the most power and leverage in the franchise. That's good. That's
Right.
where it gets really, really messy. And that's where it all just comes back to, if you're looking for who to blame, who shoulders the responsibility for this. We talked before about new owner syndrome and how it can uh s- completely side rail a franchise. And that's where they're at with Matt Ishbia. I mean,
Yeah.
he's almost he's almost too willing to spend.
Right.
Like,
Right. Well,
before, they
sure.
had an owner who wasn't willing to put anything into their franchise. And now they have an owner who wants to win so badly that he tries to take the ship out to sea, even though he completely ignores the fact that there's no base and that they're just going to sink immediately on impact. And
Right.
unfortunately, that's where the Phoenix Suns are at.
Right. No, you're absolutely right, and that's kind of where I was talking about earlier. When you're so desperate to sell and to really see what you can get, and to really bring in a star all star caliber player, and you look at what other teams in your own conference are doing, it just doesn't match up. And I that's the one thing I wish we talked about more of a team, like how Denver got their team, not what Denver's done since they won their championship, but how that Denver team was able to construct their roster, and even how Boston has been able to do theirs as well. And just it's not doing how some of these other franchises like the Suns are.
Right. No, you think you just get a ton of stars or you make a ton of trades and and then it automatically is all going to come together. Like we saw Brooklyn do the similar thing with Kevin Durant. We're now seeing it with Phoenix, right? Like you said, there's just something to be said, and this is just something we see across sports. It's
Mhm.
cultures, right? It's
Right.
always it's
Culture. Yeah.
cultures. It's teams. It's those types of things that win, and I think Matt Ishbia is going to get it right eventually, but unfortunately, they're gonna have to endure some real pain and suffer some real consequences because, mind you, it's not like this was something where Matt Ishbia allowed time to, to come, to really play out and to make decisions accordingly. Troy, it was the night of his introductory press conference that they traded for Kevin Durant. Like we're
The
talking,
day
we're
one.
talking not, we're talking not even 12 hours after introducing yourself to the fans. You trade everything and their mother to go get Kevin Durant, which on surface, if you're a fan, that's pretty exciting. But it's like when you go buy a really nice car and you drive it off the lot and then the payments start coming in and you realize that that essentially, for lack of better terms, that the mortgage is due and you got to make the payment. You realize all the zeros and the true costs, and you're like, I did not know what I was signing myself up for. That's
Right.
where they're at, because the only thing that's going to dig themselves out of this is whatever picks they get for Devin Booker and Kevin Durant, because that's where we're heading.
Dude. Well, yeah, I mean, I think trading Durant is somewhat inevitable, but man, that is a shame if you have to trade Booker because of this situation.
Well, and also, let's be honest with Kevin Durant, with how much you gave up, you're going to be lucky if you get 40 cents on the dollar, because Kevin
Yeah, right.
Durant's
Because you got
he's 36.
right. Yeah, dude. You people forget sometimes. Mikal Bridges was on that Phoenix team,
Yeah. Yeah, he
a
was
part
he
of
was
that
part of
trade.
the trade. He was part
Right.
of the trade for Kevin Durant.
Right.
Him and
What
Cam
a big
Johnson.
asset. What a big defensive asset. And we've
They had
seen him
Mikal
take leaps.
Bridges. They had Cam Johnson. They had
Right.
DeAndre Ayton. They
Yeah.
had Chris
Yeah.
Paul.
Yeah.
They had a team in the finals
Right.
not even 5 years ago.
Hmm. Right.
And now they're going to be lucky if they get to the play-in tournament,
Yeah. You're
which
absolutely
that
right.
is not what you asked for when you made this trade. And mind you, if you're James Jones, if you're the GM of this team who could potentially get fired because of all this, you're like, well, wait a minute. I'm not the one that wanted to make this trade. You're the one that came to my office and said, make this deal get done. I did it.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, glad we're not Suns fans, Sean.
Yep. And it's not like Matt Ishbia is gonna fire himself. He's the one that bought the team.
Right.
But Troy, there's a whole lot of fascinating NBA stories. It's just nice to know that the Pistons are one of the good stories.
That's right. That's right. Amen to that.
Uh-huh. And thank you, Troy, as always, for being here. Thank you for joining and listening. As always, if you like this podcast, be sure you subscribe below for more content. Thank you for joining. We'll catch you guys next time from Half Court. Be sure you're subscribed.